Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today's guest, Laura, and I have just been waffling around. I thought, let's just press record and then we won't miss anything because it's all good normally. So, hello, Laura. How are you?
Hi, Liz. I'm very good. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for, coming and doing this because we've been trying to get it done for a little while, but through all sorts,
Live.
grandparents' death and, illness and all sorts has kind of put us off back a little bit. It's rad to have you here. Can you just explain or just say to people who you are, what you do, how we know each other, and then we can maybe just dive in from there?
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, my name's Laura. My job title is adventure athlete. It's a job title I gave to myself a few years ago. I'm basically driven by two things, really: exploring new places and exploring my limits. So over the years, that has taken various different forms. I've kayaked a section of the Volga River in Russia by myself. I've cycled across Ireland. I ran across Fuerteventura. I've done quite a lot of bike adventures, actually. The longest one is cycling from Scotland to Norway. That one was 3,700 miles. And I've also dabbled a bit in open water swimming. So I swam around the island of Sark as part of a triathlon involving all three Channel Islands. I also kayaked around the island of Guernsey and cycled around the island of Jersey. So that was a weekend. That was a swim kayak.
Just a gentle weekend.
What's great about that is I was trying to avoid running, which is why I kayaked around Kennington. And then made up for it for the other one that I did.
So just briefly, because I want you to continue talking about yourself in a second, but right here, in case, and I'll stick this on the Insta page, but here is a book which I have read, and this is Laura, as you can see, and this is her book, and basically most of those stories that she's just been saying about are all featured in this book, and I highly recommend it. If you are remotely adventure driven, if you've got a slight thing in your brain of like, I'd like to go and do something really stupid but see how far I can push myself,
perfect. Yeah,
this is definitely a bloody good book. So you've done all of that. And how do we know each other?
Well, we know each other through working with BAM clothing, which, I mean, I've not got the jumper, I have got their leggings on here.
Oh, nice. I've got jeans on.
I thought you were going to do your boxes.
Obviously.
Yeah,
pants as well.
I've been an ambassador for BAM since 2015. We met each other at Kendal Festival a couple of years ago now, I think. Bonded in the silent disco element, I feel, especially last year.
Big time. Partying our backsides off.
Yeah. And here we are.
And then ever since then, as I said, so Laura very kindly sent me this book after the first Kendal Festival, and then I read it not until this year, but it's been, like I say, it's been a huge, huge inspiration for me to start realizing that things are actually more accessible than maybe you originally think. And I think we'll start with all this. Firstly, adventure athlete. I mean, that's the best job title in the world ever. I mean, I want that. I want to be one of them.
I've got ice cream enthusiast on my business cards as well, because when you're making up job titles, just go all in.
Have them all there.
But
for me, like I say, it's been a huge inspiration because as we were just talking before this, you asked me how my running training was going, because I've literally not told anyone apart from my mate, who's hopefully going to be my support guy, and my wife, obviously she knows, but I'm planning on running like Hadrian's Wall, like East Coast to West Coast, which is
you coming out with the plan? This is the public announcement of the plan.
I'm just doing it with you, Laura. Doing it with you.
Love it.
So Hadrian's Wall apparently is about 87 miles. Coast to coast is about 93, I think. And I want to basically do it in a weekend. What I want to do is I want to do it in one fucking sitting, but let's not be greedy on the first thing. So and it's kind of, I've had all these ideas going around in my head. I've kind of discussed on the podcast before about wanting to run the whole coast of the UK. But when I read your book, in my head, it's always like, well, I'm not fit enough. I haven't done enough. I haven't done this, haven't done that. Now, as far as running's concerned, as you've kind of alluded to, running's not necessarily your favorite bit. Like maybe cycling would be more your favorite.
I mean, it certainly wasn't. I certainly love it. I mean, that's why effectively I took on the run, because I think one of the big things I had in relation to running was all these things that you just said. I'm not fit enough, I can't do that. And I had this real block with running, especially. So at that point, I'd already done quite a few adventures, and it just didn't seem to matter because they were all in different disciplines. I just thought, yeah, but I've done cycling. Okay, I'm an all right kayaker. I know I've got some endurance stuff there, but I just thought, but I'm definitely not a runner. There was always this afterthought of, yeah, but not for running.
Isn't that what everyone always says? Yeah, but I'm not a runner.
Yeah, because I think, you know, it's one of those things, especially it is a lot more, I think, intensive on the body. I think with bikes, especially, you can, they're quite supportive. And as long as you get a good bike fit dialed in, I think that's quite important. You can pretty much like click in and just go. But with running, I had to basically relearn how to run, you know.
I hate
We're going to go on a bike ride. It's fine. But you know, with running, like if your technique is bad, and you know, I think there's quite a bit more of a learn, especially because we're not necessarily like dialed into natural movement anyway. And you pick up bad habits, and I think they're exacerbated a lot easier with long distance running effectively.
Yeah.
And you can break them, and you can, you know, there's all kinds of way around it. But I think I was very aware that I'd never done any running. The bit that I had done, because I knew nothing about it, you know, I'm charging off and going too fast, and I was like, how does anyone do this? Like my heart rate's like 171, and I'm like, how the hell do people do this for like 25 miles? And you have to learn like all these little things about breathing and technique, and like, you know.
So you went and did what then? You decided I've done some adventures, but I need to do a running adventure. What shall I do?
So I ran the length of Fuerteventura,
which is roughly how far?
It's 100 miles. So I did it in 4 days. So like 4 marathons basically back to back. Because I wanted to like 10x it, you know. If I did a marathon, maybe I thought my gremlin might still pop up and be like, wow, you just blagged your way through a marathon. You know, anyone can get through one. But I wanted by the end of it for there to be no doubt, for me not to have anything, you know, I wanted to shut my gremlin up basically. And then also when we were looking at like possible options, we were like, I was on Wikipedia and it was like Fuerteventura translated to like great adventure apparently. And I was like, well, there we go. Let's just go there.
Job's good.
And that was it.
And as you said, being like 100 miles, let's say, that's a perfect round number, like do it 4 days. And so prior to actually doing that, how far had you run?
I had done a marathon distance, but I basically walked most of it.
Okay.
So it just really, in my mind, that doesn't really count. I had like a mild bout of food poisoning. So I did do a marathon distance. But in terms of an uninterrupted run, it was like half marathon.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Cool, because we've just prior to this we were just talking and like, you know, I run relatively frequently, but like, because I mean the time thing is what mostly gets me. So like I've run like a half marathon like 3 or 4 times now, and it feels piece of cake. So I figured if I can do 15 miles, I could do 30.
It didn't for me. I think I did maybe 1 half marathon. Like that was my longest run before I did it. That was it, and I was woefully underprepared, as is a common theme.
But
things I do. As
we said though, didn't stop you, did it?
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
And one of the things I loved about this book, and it will go into this because this probably comes back to your very first big adventure, but your talk of gremlins, and like you know, you discuss this numerous times throughout the book, and I think we all definitely have them, and I've definitely got my own gremlins, if you like, let's say, probably around cycling in all fairness, but and swimming it like breaststroke.
Yeah, swimming's another one though. You need to like. Which is what I learned when I did the swim. You know, the technique makes a ginormous difference. I remember the first time I hooked up with my swim coach, and he's like gliding gracefully, and I'm like, yeah, how hard can it be? And I'm behind him like this splashy, like exactly, like this mess. And it's like, oh, technique.
Yeah, our technique, that's super handy. So can you just kind of maybe, gremlins, I kind of like, because of what, because I want to talk adventures, and I think we could probably talk for about like 17 hours about like just the numerous things of your adventures, and I definitely want to try and like touch on most of them, but like the overarching thing comes back to then really part of your job is public speaking, talking to kids and schools and whatever else, and like inspire, like you have with me, like totally inspiring people to realize your body is capable of so much more. And you, like the gremlin side of things, to me, the way it's kind of like this theme that runs throughout your book, and how each adventure you went on was always to try to like like corner the next gremlin, it felt, and be like, no, like I'm done with you. And so these kind of started on your first big adventure to a certain degree, which is kind of the most outrageous story for a first adventure. For one,
it's pretty spicy.
You kind of went balls deep, like you went big, which is, I love. You kind of have become semi-famous in
very
Russia.
Specific circles. Very niche.
Very niche. Infamy, let's say. So let's discuss briefly your or however long you want to do it for, but your first big jaunt to Russia. And obviously, if people want to read it from the story, they can always read the book. But kind of, I want to kind of get into the gremlin side, and then how you've managed through experience to begin to and so hopefully people can maybe take stuff away.
So the first big adventure was to kayak the Volga River in Russia. Basically, I got to a point in my life where I was really unsatisfied, thought that I was wasting away my potential. Was a qualified personal trainer. That wasn't quite the right fit. So what I knew, I wanted an endurance challenge, basically. I just didn't know what it was. And the way I ended up in Russia was one of my jobs that I was working to kind of fund this big trip was hosting a pub quiz. And one of the questions was, double the length of the Danube, what is Europe's longest river, or something like that. And the answer just happened to be the Volga River. And as I read out this pub quiz question, I thought, I'm going to Google that. I think that's a great place for an adventure. And before I went to bed that night, I was like, that's it. That's going to be my first big adventure. And it just felt right. I got so excited. I just thought, wow, 2,300 miles. What a fantastic challenge to take on. I want a bit of that. Hadn't done any real kayaking before or anything like that.
Obviously.
Didn't seem relevant. I just went to work basically on bridging all those gaps, which I think is a common process for me. Like, if you don't know how to do something, it's fine. No one knows how to do anything. No one is born knowing how to be like an Antarctic explorer. They have to do training days. They have to learn all of it. So that was my kind of mentality. So I went through all these things, learned Russian, had like my magic letter for translation or any of that, like planned that river to within an inch of its life. I could tell you where the food stops are. I can tell you where the banks are high. So if I need to portage, if there's bad weather, I really went deep on the planning, I think, to make myself feel a bit better. And then I get to Russia, and then basically, I get this mammoth curveball that you can do all the planning in the world, but basically, to sum up this ridiculous story, my trip ends up going viral. I stay with someone and mention to them that I'm looking, like if they know anyone along the river that can put me up, that's lovely. And they put a post on this social media site, like Russians' version of Facebook, basically. And that post ends up going absolutely bananas. It gets picked up by like news crews. They're like, on my first day, before I've even taken a single paddle stroke on this river, I've got news crews at the start of about like translating it into about 4 different languages, like this news program. And I'm just like trying to play it really cool. And I'm like, yeah, this will definitely be the biggest adventure I've done so far.
I mean, you weren't lying.
No, I wasn't technically lying. And it's just this real circus. And anyway, the news crew goes, my heart's pounding, and then I paddle off in the wrong direction. And then anyway, I get on my way and I'm like, it's fine. I'm sure it will die down. And then I've barely got any phone reception. I'm in my little kayak for like 10 hours a day. So I'm rather unaware that behind the scenes, actually, it's not at all calming down. It's doing quite the opposite. And it's gone viral completely, and I thought that stuff only happened with like cat videos on the internet. But anyway, it went absolutely bananas. And effectively, that publicity brought some real safety concerns to the trip. So I didn't end up getting to the end of that river. I ended up coming off for 2 weeks to try and figure it out. And then eventually coming home very early. So it was a bit of a false start.
But I mean, like I said, you went big to begin with, like straight in the deep end. Now, you kind of mention it throughout the book, but that... I mean, I'm not going to say failure because I don't see it as that, but like DNF, let's say, then really kind of in your brain kind of gave you like this like inner gremlin of like every time you wanted to do something, it's like, am I just going to fail? Am I going to be known as that?
Because it was such a public failure. Like I've made peace with it over the years, but you know, because I was raising money for this charity, when I set off to do it, I thought that's what you did. You took on a challenge. Because at this point, I wasn't necessarily thinking I'll make a career out of it. I was just thinking I want to do something big for myself. I'll raise money for a charity. You know, it'll be this big, this great endeavor. And then I just come home, I've got tabloids calling me non-stop, and it's just like, it's not even like a quiet failure, you know.
In the UK as well then?
Yeah, absolutely. All the tabloids in the UK picked it up. So it's not like I just didn't finish. It's like I didn't finish and there's like newspapers calling me and there's newspaper articles. Yeah, exactly. And so it's this huge thing that like was just, I mean, in hindsight, what I realized that it did, which was really useful, is completely obliterate my ego. Because it's like I set up and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be the first woman to do this, and then it's like coming home like very
I'm not the first woman to do
yeah,
this.
not the first woman to do that. But
still time though.
Yeah, I mean there is still time. I think importantly though, had I stopped there, I don't think I'd have ever gotten over it. You know, it would have been this thing that I did, but I forced myself to get out and do another one like a couple of weeks later, and I'm still really grateful I had the tenacity to do that. Because I think without actually overcoming that initial failure, nothing else that followed would have worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the one that you followed it up with? Was that another?
It was.
Was that the cycle?
Yeah. So I, again, with like these novelty ideas, and just like, I got invited to my uncle's wedding in Ireland. And I remember years ago, I saw this TV program about the Wild Atlantic Way. And I just thought that would always be a really lovely route to explore. So I decided to cycle it on the way to my uncle's wedding. So it's 1,600 miles long. It's the world's longest coastal route. Again, hadn't been on my bike for like months. I've been kayaking, and also didn't have a proper, I had like this entry-level road bike. But you know, it was a bike and that was good enough. And so that was the next challenge.
But I love it. So basically all of like, do you know what I mean? Especially the cool thing is like, I mean, as you said, you've given yourself the title of adventure, what was it?
Yeah,
Say it again.
Adventure athlete.
Adventure athlete. So you've given yourself the title, which I'm pretty certain the job, what do they call them? The career advisor at school probably never had much of a description for.
Yeah.
But you've kind of had to just work it out yourself. And it's kind of, you know, and I think this is one of the things which happens far too much in life is you never do something because you feel unprepared to do it. I mean, I'm very much to a certain degree that person, because I'm kind of a bit like, I know what I don't know too much. So therefore I kind of maybe sometimes struggle to take the step because I know that there's all this stuff I don't know, and like, but in your case, it's just being like, okay, we're going to go do this. That'll be fine. And I mean, you plan to hell, and like, I mean, I probably wouldn't do that. I probably would have just turned up at like the top of the river and gone, right, let's just go and have a paddle then. Where are you going to sleep? Oh, I don't know. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't plan about sleeping or anything like that. But I mean, I didn't want to, especially for kayaking, you know, I was like, this could go very wrong. There are some safety elements. So like there were some guys that had done it before. So I had planned enough to know that I wasn't being reckless and an idiot, and I wasn't going to like, you know, so I wanted to know there was no white water sections. So, you know, like enough to start, I think.
Yeah. But then you've managed to somehow, like, you know, when you kind of get to like further through the book and further through your adventures, like you've really kind of actually begun to dial in like, oh yeah, I didn't know what I was doing and I've kind of blagged this and blagged that, but actually it's kind of all come from this like big funnel, and it's actually, you know, you now kind of probably, you know, legitimately have the title of adventure extreme, whatever.
Adventure athlete.
Why do I keep forgetting that? It's ridiculous. It's because I know I want to do it and my brain's not letting me, you see. You know, that kind of well, I guess it happens throughout all of it. And I think this is in my head for when it comes to my adventures that I plan. There's an element of, I'll be all right. Like, it'll be hard. I know it's going to be hard, but I'll be fine. Now, I know that throughout some of these adventures that you've done, I mean, maybe you can go in, hopefully you can go into it. It's like the lows, because I don't think, and again, I've not been there yet, but I'm sure I'm going to find them. Like, how low are some of the lows? Because I know, like, on your trip from your Irish trip, and then also when you did your, like, what was it, like 13,000 miles or whatever it was from like Scotland to
Norway, it's 3,700 miles.
Yeah, what crazy amount. Like, you know, I mean, there's times when you feel broken. And I think, I mean, maybe in my head, like, that's where we learn.
Oh, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. You know,
I haven't learned yet. I haven't personally learned yet, but that's what I'm telling myself.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you to get into the pain cave. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think one of the fundamental things that, you know, for me, like going back to this job title that I made up, it was, for me, it was a combination of two things. It was an adventure, but I want the athlete is in there because they're self-propelled adventures, you know, like I always wanted them to be physically demanding for me. And that's grown throughout the years. So what was physically demanding a few years ago might not be the same now. And I'm constantly trying to do that. But it is because I think you have to get to your threshold point. To discover how much further you can go. And the problem, I think, not the problem, but you know, maybe the challenge for a lot of us is that we cut off long before that. You know, we get a bit uncomfortable and then we think, okay, that's it. And I think it's a real shame, because if you can just push yourself a bit further, I think what you end up doing is surprising yourself, and that is incredibly powerful. Like over the years, I've completely redefined the type of person I think I am just by putting myself in those types of situations and doing things I didn't think I could do.
Yeah.
And we don't often give ourselves permission, I think, to take it that far. And I think that what we think we want is like convenience and, you know, Amazon Prime delivery and like everything on tap. And actually we don't. If we want any kind of life satisfaction, what we want is something to feel proud of at the end of the day. We want something, you know, to feel that sense of achievement. And it doesn't mean you have to do that by running across an island, but I do think we need to embrace like a growth and challenge mindset in whatever area we're in.
For me, again, that, you know, whatever it might be at the moment, whether it is kind of some of the running I'm doing, whether it's like, you know, jumping in my cold tub every morning, or whatever, you know, like riding around in my pants in the snow. For one, there's the element of like, I like to not feel embarrassed. I think that's, for me, that's quite a big thing. And I think maybe that comes down to ego to a certain degree of like wanting to constantly not feel that. But that growth mindset and the ability to move outside of comfort. I mean, as you said, everyone wants everything on tap. Everything's Amazon Prime, next day delivery, like perfectly, you know, warm, you know, perfectly temperature.
I mean,
rooms.
like I had that in my, you know, I just remember having everything every financial need that I could ever need possibly met when I was working in this office before I started doing stuff. And I just remember being so completely miserable. It's like I got to the point that everyone was telling me, you know, that being a successful adult was all about. And it's like, oh no, there has to be more than this. Like, what on earth am I doing with my potential? Like carrying folders around an office and, you know, daydreaming by the photocopying machine.
So, I mean, like, I think that's quite important, because I think, I mean, it's so hard to, and, you know, I'm sure being an adventure athlete is probably not, you know, a millionaire making job career. You know, being a yoga teacher / movement therapist, you know, is not a millionaire making job career by any stretch. Doing podcasts is not a millionaire making job career, but the fulfillment and the actual contentment that comes from realizing that you're doing something which is like, I don't know, like life-changing for yourself, but also, like, you know, the way I see it is, you know, through your book, probably through your conversations, it's really, really inspiring to me.
Yeah,
it's hugely inspiring. I think that's like, in my view, especially, you know, especially from women in particular, I think having people like you and Anna McNuff and, you know, Sophie, what she said, challenge Sophie, but you know, all you girls who are just going, I'm just going to go and do something ridiculous. And I think it's like, oh my God, it's like, I don't have to, because I'm pretty certain, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number, but 95% of people who sit in an office don't really like that job. And I bet they all have like spending habits and like addictions.
I mean, this is it. You know, I racked up all this credit card debt, and I think I'm not going to sit here and be like everyone should leave their office jobs, because I think, you know, with a more mature head on, I think even now I could be like, well, I'm sure you can find value in it, and I'm sure you can find some way of doing that. And it's not about any of that, but you mentioned women in sport in particular, and actually I think that's one of the things that latched me onto this. And when I decided, no, I'm going to try and make a career out of this, is because my early talks were in schools. And the drop-off rate for young women and young girls in sport is absolutely horrendous.
I bet.
And it really upsets me, because I felt all this pressure growing up. Like, I actually have a background in the theatre industry, so I worked in that industry until my 20s. And you know, body image was so rife. We're all in leotards every week doing dancing, and it's like I didn't have that reference point that I have now, that I really wish I did, in that I relate to my body in terms of what it can do, rather than what it looks like and what the magazines and whatever social media nowadays, but magazines back in the day, like what it's telling me I should look like. You know, all I used to see is like this stick thin like model, because it was, you know, the 90s, and then me, and it's like, I don't look like that. Oh my God, let me try and starve myself, and I'm just not going to eat that. And I find that absolutely heartbreaking even now, because it's like, if you can flip that and feel proud of what your body can do, you don't care how big your legs are. You know, like, it's like,
but
oh,
also,
if you carried me up the mountain, great.
Exactly. If you've got a couple of pins that have just basically cycled you 3,500 miles over, you know, big ass mountains, like going through the Scottish Highlands, going like, I don't know, like up through some of that crazy stuff through Norway, like being able to be like, yeah, my thighs are like muscly and big, but guess what? Like, I've done, and you know, and I think, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think that this is my male head, let's say. To me, like, I find it more inspiring to a certain degree when I see like a bunch of you women who I kind of am friends with and whatever else, and you're just like, you're going out and doing crazy things. I'm like, this is going to sound slightly like prehistorically sexist, but it's like, if they could do it, why can't I? Do you know what I mean? Like, I know that's like, but it's kind of like,
no, I don't care who, like, who
like,
sees me
I'm a big strong guy who can, like, who knows my body. Like you've just gone and bloody run fuerteventura. Like, that's amazing. Like, I want to go and do something like that. And I think, like you said, I think body image and stuff is a big thing, much more for women obviously than men. But like, I think being able to go into schools and just be like, look, this body has just taken me something and doing crazy.
Focused on the wrong things, you know. And it's not, I mean, women do have it especially bad in the media, but to be honest, I think any gender, like any human body, like, it's just a better focus, because I think it also gives us, I mean, on the one side, it means we don't have as many issues perhaps with body image, but on the other, when you're like appreciating what your body can do, you naturally fuel it a bit better. Like, you know, I don't eat junk food throughout the day, not because I'm worried about, you know, how I'm going to look in my jeans. I don't eat junk food all day because it actually doesn't make me feel as good for the run I need to do that morning, you know. And I actually think that a lot of the issues we have are because we're so disconnected from our bodies, and because we're so like wrapped up in like, oh, I'll just buy this over here, and that's why I'm feeling miserable. And I know it's a bit of a tangent I'm going on now, but I just think sport is uniquely powerful for reconnecting to the things that are really important for a good life.
And I think, you know, unfortunately, there is, you know, and again, this goes into some sort of vicious cycle, but sport and exercise and just movement in general, and breathing more, because it's sort of title of Move, Breathe, Live, but like they're so important to like actually embody yourself. And, you know, if you end up in a place where, you know, you're a bigger person, you don't like how you look, and, you know, the magazines, like, it's so much harder to begin to like to do stuff. But actually, like, the cool thing to me, it's like being able to set some goal of like, and it doesn't have, you know, it doesn't have to be run fuerteventura, but it could just be like, I'm just going to go and do 10,000 steps a day. And actually, how much you get, like, again, that rush and buzz that you had when you finished any of your challenges. Like, if you've set yourself 10,000 steps a day for a month and you go and you nail it, like,
100% agree.
You're going to get that same 100%. Rush.
And I think also the reason that's so powerful is because you teach yourself that you keep your word to yourself. And I think that in itself is really powerful for self-esteem. You know, if you set yourself something, whether it's I'm going to eat healthier, or whether, you know, I'm going to like do this many steps a day, and you just keep not doing it, you end up feeling rubbish, and that has a knock-on effect on the habits that you do anyway. Whereas if you then manage to pull that off, you have a new reference frame that actually, a new reference point that actually, no, I'm the kind of person that does this and sees it through, and that gives you a little boost, and you can, you know, you carry on from there.
Yeah, I mean, it is really a case of like, you know, it's that thing of, is it Lao Tzu or something? It's like, you know, a journey of 1,000 steps starts with one. You know,
a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
That's and it literally is, you know, if, you know, depending on where you are, you know, if you are, you know, a sedentary type person, being able to go, okay, I'm not actually going to go and run fuerteventura on my fucking first thing, but I am just going to go and step up and start to do more. And, you know, from my perspective of when I would love to be able to go into schools more and like try to, through my movement therapy and stuff I've learned, is like, there's so much that if you're a person who doesn't like activities and physical stuff, that you could do with your body to understand and embody yourself more. So actually then going outside and doing more, it would feel so much better.
Yeah, that's it. You know, there's something, I honestly do believe there's something for everyone. You know, if you don't like cycling, don't go cycling. Like, that's absolutely fine. No, not you. You're gonna have to come. No, just kidding. But like there is, you know, like people do netball. There is something for everyone. And you know, maybe you go hiking, maybe you don't go running. And it's not about like, oh, I need to be like an athletic person. No. It's just like a bit more balance, I think, for an overall more like a higher quality sense of life satisfaction. You know, our bodies are this incredible machine,
unreal,
and they adapt to the environment. And the issue is that we choose the issue, and the opportunity is that we choose the environment. And I think people often forget that their body will naturally adapt to whatever they're doing. You know, there's so many stories of people who did absolutely nothing and then ran on to, you know, do ultra marathons. And I think it's important to remember that inside, whether you want to do an ultra marathon or not, you know, you have a body that is designed to move, and then that is designed to function. I mean, you must see this all the time in the work that you do, you know, adjusting people's bodies and things like that, that actually it's just it's habitual way of being.
Absolutely. And you know, I don't talk about my business very often because obviously I'm talking to other people, but like, it's crazy how little sometimes it can take for someone to be out of pain and be able to move better, and actually have that thing of like, oh, my body is actually like a living, breathing organism that like wants to move better. Like, it doesn't have to be like this sedentary, like, oh, I'm in aches, I've got pains, I can't do this, I can't do that. And yeah, that kind of, it really does make a huge like difference to people's mindset of like, oh, I thought I had, you know, arthritis in my foot. I've literally got one guy, he's given up rugby. He had given up rugby, given up all sorts because he had all this foot and ankle pain from a really old injury. The surgeons basically said, we need to fuse it. That's all we've got left to do. We've done everything. We just need to fuse your foot and ankle. And he came to see me, and, you know, again, I didn't do anything. I'm just good at seeing. Like, he did all the work. I'm not going to take any credit for what his body did. His body was happy to change. But we just managed to give his body a break. And he literally texted me, I think the next day or like 4 days later or something like that, and was just like, I think you saved my marriage. He was like, I honestly don't think I realized how grumpy I was and how snappy I was because the pain I was in. And being able to just be like, you know, having a different set of eyes.
Though. That's amazing. And I think that's it. You know, like when I visit schools, or I was in a business talk last week, like, I'm not expecting the workforce to quit their jobs and like come out with me on 3 months. But I think there's such a spectrum between like going off for 3 months and doing absolutely nothing. You know, and it's not that I want people to go and like be like, yeah, screw the office. It's not that at all. It's, you know, similar to yourself, I used to work as a personal trainer, and I just used to see all these injuries and all these habitual, because we just sit, you know, and we punch over and all the rest of it. And it's like, I don't care like whether you want to, you know, not head off for 3 months, but you should at least, I think, you know, to prevent injury, which affects your quality of life, put some kind of movement in. You know, you don't have to do it. And actually, the more you do it, the more you realize that it's not like this horrible chore that you have to do. It's like a gift that's really good,
like exhilarating quite
self-care,
often.
you know.
Yeah.
And what we think is self-care is like ordering a takeout on a Friday and like going down to the pub, and like we've just got some things wired a bit wrong, I think, in culture.
I mean, what you just said there kind of like just made like, even in your book you've highlighted this thing, because you know when you started you were like balls deep, let's go and like kayak the length of the bloody of Russia.
Yeah.
And then you came back and you were like, okay, actually I'm gonna, well, okay, then you went and like cycled fucking Ireland. But you know, you basically, as you kind of said in the book, and as you kind of said, there's a big difference between having to go and take 3 or 4 months off work to go and do something ridiculous, and as you said, take a weekend. And again, I still think you were mental, but which is amazing. But you went and I can't remember the order you did it in. Cycled, swam, and you basically. So let's go into that, because I think it's fascinating, and like so you cycled, swam.
Yeah, kayaked. So I swam around the island of Sark.
Which if no one's ever looked at, by the way, go and Google. Like, it's unbelievably beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely stunning. There's no cars allowed on it or anything.
Yeah,
so it's
incredible.
A cool little island. So that was, I think that's just over 4 miles. So that's classified as like a marathon swim for an open water swim. And then the next day after that was kayaking around Guernsey. We actually, I mean, it serves me right for trying to avoid the running portion of a triathlon, but we got chucked off the water because the wind speeds were too severe and all the rest of it, and it was like quite busy. So I ended up walking a half marathon to finish the loop around Guernsey of that one anyway. And then the final one was the cycle around Jersey. So that was 3 days.
Yeah, sorry. So what's the distance around Jersey?
Jersey is 45 miles.
Okay. And then the kayak was?
The kayak, I'm trying to remember now. I think it was about 26 all round. So I should have kayaked the whole of it. Yeah. I ended up doing half a marathon on foot because the guy I was with as well, like we need to get off the water. Like it wasn't safe to be in the water. So yeah.
So again, that kind of comes back to this idea of like, you know, okay, not necessarily, you know, a beginner's
no, but out of that, the swim was the one that I was focused on. So like the other two were just thrown in because I was like, oh, I might as well make it a triathlon. Yeah. The swim was the deep learning curve for me. So I focused all of my training on the swim by a long way, because that's the one that I wanted to pull off and know about. And the other two were just to like complete.
And so what did you learn on that one then?
I learned I don't like swimming. So I mean, it had a lot of value, but like, I don't think I'm not going to say never. But I did find the swim really mentally. I don't know how people like do it as their main thing, because you're just face down in the water like the entire time. I'm really proud of myself.
You don't get to enjoy anything.
No, it was like, oh, look, there's some jellyfish. And like, oh, you know, you're seeing like glimpses of the land when you're coming up to breathe bilaterally. And that's basically it. It was, and like, perhaps if I was more zen at the time, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but there's no distraction. So you're literally face down in murky water for like 5-6 hours. And that is, again, a very effective mental like strength exercise, but it wasn't one that I was necessarily like anticipating. But you know, it was fascinating because you do learn all these different techniques, and it was this curiosity to like, what can my body do next? So I'm really glad I did it.
So was that 4 miles continuous swimming?
Yeah.
I mean,
just over, and because we had to time it with the tides as well. Like the tides around the Channel Islands are really like severe. So we actually had I had a support boat with me, and then there was this other guy called Adrian Sarche, AD, to his friends, and he's like this incredible open water swimmer. You know, like he has done so many phenomenal swims, and he was actually training for a much bigger swim when I got in touch with him. So actually, he joined me for the swim as like a training swim, you know. And like I remember us getting out at the end of this day, and I'm like in bits, you know. I hadn't Vaseline my neck well enough, like, so the chafing issue was horrendous. Like I looked like I've been garroted by a werewolf. A second to that, because I'd not done any of my training in open water as such as the sea, I hadn't really nailed that, you know. I hadn't anticipated basically after that, I think it was like 6 hours or something silly like that, all the salt water had made my mouth like really sore, and more importantly, because I hadn't been training in waves, I'd swallowed quite a lot of it. And by the end of it, the mere like a freckle of like salt water touching my throat was just making me gag. So like we've got this news crew following us like to document the Landliners triathlon, and I'm like ducking behind boats going bleh, bleh. And like I get out and I'm just like, I feel like I've been savaged by Mother Nature, and like completely dead on my feet. And like we're getting this interview, and Adie's like, yeah, pretty good training swim, you know. And he's like, can you look a bit more tired?
Seriously, look at me, I'm on the floor.
Yeah.
It always blows my mind when you see kind of like Ross Edgley like swimming around the UK and like,
yeah, I mean, I don't want to do that.
I mean, I want to run around.
I'm not going to say never, but like I think the key thing is that I'm not a sadist, you know. I want a bit of suffering, but there has to be a reason behind it.
Yes.
Like, and you know, and I've had a lot of pain and suffering on my trips, but it hasn't been exclusively that. I do a lot of it to explore new places, and I think that one of the reasons I've not yet returned to the swim is because I'm like, well, I don't really feel like I'm getting the benefits of that.
Is that what the map behind you is? You're just ticking off all the places you're
going
to do crazy
absolutely
stuff? Yeah, we've got a scratch off map which we do that
on. Good.
Yeah, it's kind of have you doing all this stuff? Like, I mean, I guess I'll come to that question in a second, but like as far as Gremlins, like I guess because you managed that swim, like, and you did manage to complete the swim, that I mean, for an open water swim, I think 4 miles is a pretty decent first adventure. Like, I think that's, I mean, I did just over a mile in the pool a while back, but I had to stop like every 5 or 6 lengths, so I was stopping like every 150 meters to kind of go oh god, standing at the end of the pool and go again.
There's nowhere to stop if you're in the sea.
That's literally why I asked the question of like, was it all continuous, or did you actually get to stop? And it's
no, there were two. So basically, there was 2 bits where I didn't stop, but like there was a really, really funny tidal section that we went through. And there's like these 2 little rock bits, and basically I wasn't strong enough at that point to swim through the channel, so I had to climb over the rocks to like to get through this like channel of water. So that was a bit of a scramble, but that doesn't really count.
That's not a rest, by the way.
No, it's definitely not a rest. And then the only other bit was like just before we finished, because I was like, I'm gonna be sick, so I like dipped around the corner to like again another rock. And just tried to throw up there, and then
dry heaved and then carried on.
Exactly.
Amazing. I mean, fair play to you, because I, like you say, like I've got grand plans for wanting to do some silly stuff, but like swimming's not very hard. Like even the idea of doing just a normal triathlon, like just no. Just no, like I want to. I don't know.
Fine. There's lots of sports I look at and I'm like, no, probably not. You know, that's fine. Like I didn't do it because I thought it was going to be like this miserable thing. I did it because I was curious how I would find it. Like
but that's really for me. That's that's always the question of like, how will I respond to this? How's my body going to do? Like where? Like, and the thing the place my brain goes, and like you've kind of mentioned that when you did the first one, you did it for charity. I don't know whether or not when you do these things you still do them for charities or not.
No, I don't. I mean, the thing is, because I support so much in my day-to-day life anyway, so like I'm supportive of the Duke of Edinburgh and things like that, but I just find, to be honest, when you're doing these things non-stop, no one gives you money anymore, really.
No. Well, that's
like no one's going to.
Well, that's one of the things I want, but like, so for mine, like, you know, doing this 90 miles in 3 days, whatever it is, people are like, oh, you're going to do it for charity, you can do it for charity, you know, what charity? And I was like, no, I don't think I am.
I mean, that's the other thing as well, is that I think it's like absolutely great if people do want to fundraise for charity. I'm not knocking that in the slightest. But I think for me as well, it's like I want to make it okay that I'm doing this just for the sake of doing it, rather than having to link it to that. You know, there's other ways to support good causes, and I do throughout the year. But at the point where, you know, they don't have to be linked.
But for me as well, again, this goes back to the mental game. And so for like my whole journey at the moment, like from maybe really about 5 years ago when I started getting into breath work more, and I've been free diving and the like, and there's the mental challenge of like, how do I respond to being into this horrible, like, I mean, free diving's not horrible, it's amazing, but it's weirdly, it could be seen as, a lot of people think it's like horrendous, but for me, the idea of going and doing a big run most people go and do the London Marathon and they do it for charity. And again, not bashing it by any means, but in my head, I want to do something crazy with me and my brain and my body. And I want to see where I'm able to go to. Now, if I'm doing that for charity and I've raised $2,000 or something for whoever it is, like to a certain degree, I'm going to force myself to do it because I've got that on my back. Whereas for me, the idea of like potentially getting 60, 70 miles in onto a 90-mile run and being like, I'm dead. Like, can I still do this? Do I want to do this? Everything hurts. What am I doing?
I think that's such an important part of anything, because when people talk to me about, I should stay motivated and all the rest of it, it's like you have to know your why anyway. And if your why is raising money for charity, that's one way of doing it. But regardless of what it is, there's going to be that point where you want to give up. And as long as you have a good answer for when that happens. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what my answer is, apart from the fact of like, can I be stronger?
Yeah, but mentally. That's, I often talk about this. If you ask yourself good questions, you get much better answers. And I think one of the questions I consistently try and ask is, what am I capable of?
Yes.
Chasing the answer to that, and even trying to find out the answer to that can be a really. It's taken me years. It's like 7-8 years later, and I'm still going, what can I do? What can I do? And that's enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of got that whole, crazy David Goggins thing. Like, I don't want to kind of go quite down his route, but like, it's that thing of like, how can you possibly know? Like, and to me, it kind of goes like, you can take the answer from what you do physically in an adventure athlete kind of way into the rest of your life. Obviously, if your job is an adventure athlete, you are putting it into your job. But if your job isn't an adventure athlete, then being able to kind of go, actually, I can do so much more within this.
Definitely. But that's why I think I'm really keen to emphasize that it's a spectrum, and you don't have to go off and run 100 miles. Like, for a lot of people, it's just like that mindset will then help you maybe set up a business, or maybe set up a new initiative at work. Like, whatever it is, there's so many different ways. I think it's just the difference between coasting through and just kind of floating along and feeling a bit miserable and dissatisfied and thinking there's nothing you can do about it, to being proactive and being like, okay, what do I want to contribute? Where are my strengths? How can I make this more fulfilling for myself? Because, especially when I go into offices to do talks, it's like, you're probably not going to come off for 3 months and cycle to wherever, but what in this is applicable to your everyday life? There's a lot,
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of, coming into that then, because obviously we're like 10-15 minutes away from the end, which is crazy, but so your work, and again, I think this is where really everything we've just said kind of begins to tap into maybe your why, because yes, your why is, what am I capable of, but at the same time, like, going into offices, schools, like businesses, how did that come about? Let's say, how do you, like, what's your why in that situation?
So I mean, it's fairly similar whoever I'm talking to, really. I think it's hopefully showing people that they can squeeze a bit more out of life, in whatever way. So it's really obvious with kids in schools, obviously, and especially, as I mentioned earlier, with girls in sport, is trying to undo some of this toxic stuff that floats around about, female body image, but that follows into adulthood anyway. I did an event for Women's Day, and it was Women's Day last week, and so there was a lot of conversations around that, and that was just as applicable whether you're a teenager or you're in the office. I think in general, like, I try and, whenever I think about the purpose of the why behind why I do stuff, it's like, I just want to leave things a bit better than I found them. And I think as an overall, like, life mission, it's simple, but it's not easy, and it's like, but what can I do? And if I've just planted one seed to one person in that room, then it's still a success, and if I've got one person to maybe like be like, oh, maybe I'll do parkrun on a Saturday, I'm ecstatic. Like, that's fantastic, and I think that's a large part of it. And I think the impetus behind that is from being so desperately miserable in my 20s, and also being haunted by this idea that I'm just wasting my potential. And it's like, I've just got this amazing life just because of luck of geography, you know, all my basic needs are met. And it's like, what on earth am I doing with it? And it used to really upset me that I was just like, you're just basically carrying a folder around the office and hoping no one notices that you're like on Wikipedia all day. And I was just like, I've got, like, I have more than this, you know, this cannot be what I do. Like, what a waste. My poor mum, you know, who went through the effort of childbirth to what, for me to sit here on Wikipedia. And it's that as well. It's just like, you know, you have more than this to contribute.
And it is a funny thing, isn't it, of how, I guess, you know, this is what the, you know, our Western life tells us, but essentially it's born, go to school, go to uni, come out, get married, have kids, buy a house, blah, you know, that whole thing laid out to be a successful grown-up adult. And
I mean, that's it, because it's like, you know, I'm here to do more than buy IKEA furniture. There's got to be more to it than this. And it was like, I was on this track, and it looked, on the outside, I looked like a really successful adult, you know? So I had all these people around be like, oh, great, Laura's finally like getting some financial responsibility and all the rest of it. And it's like, yeah, but I'm miserable. And that has a knock-on effect. Like you mentioned earlier, a client who's like, oh, I think you saved my marriage because I'm in a lot less pain. And actually, there's more than one type of pain. And it's like, I was so miserable in my job. It's like, what kind of sister was I? What kind of girlfriend was I? You know, like, that's why I think I'm passionate about people unlocking a bit more, because it does have this ripple effect into the community.
Yes.
If you're that miserable and you're that dissatisfied and you're unhealthy and you're grumpy and you're making bad decisions, you know, you can't help but for that to ripple out.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like you said, it's like, if you are in that job where you're unhappy and you're miserable, you know, and that's going to make you want to go home, sit in front of the TV, have a beer, like eat some crisps, like watch some Netflix, like go to sleep at 12:30, get up at 6, you know, and you kind of get into that vicious cycle. But actually being able to kind of potentially go, oh, actually, like, maybe I'm going to go and do something once a month, which kind of gives me something, and then your life suddenly has this like little spark. And that's where you can suddenly go, well, I can do a bit more, because actually I'm building to this thing every week, every month. I'm going to go and do this, and so the rest of my time is planning for it, and you suddenly get.
But that's it, that spark that you just mentioned is such a good word for it, because it is that spark and it gives us energy. I think that's a really important thing, you know, whenever I've gone through tough times, it's like I've noticed what gives me energy and what takes away energy.
Yes.
And we need that, you know, like it's not selfish to try and seek, whether it's a creative pursuit or an athletic pursuit, you know, we need more people who have that spark.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, we need to come to the last question just a minute, but obviously, as we mentioned at the beginning, we met through bamboo, so I'm just going to take this opportunity to basically just bamboo legs jeans. To, you know, if you haven't, then obviously make sure you do go and follow Laura. Like we've all been doing some bits and pieces for BAM, which is all going to come out fairly soon, and so you need to go and check all those out because they're all super fun. But yeah, can you just like briefly just say like how's BAM been like useful and helpful and supportive of you throughout this kind of your adventure athlete time?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I've been working with BAM since 2015, and the reason BAM staff, I got involved with BAM, is basically because it's anti-bacterial, their stuff. You can really usefully wear them on adventures for days on end without stinking. So that's basically this is basically how I got involved with them, because I was like, great, I can't wash for like 2 weeks, so let's try and like survive in society throughout that time. But it's evolved much more than that now, you know, like it's been beautiful to watch that company grow and develop to the powerhouse of good that they are now, especially for such a small company. And I think everyone would agree who works with them, you know, they what they do really well are these clothes that are fit for adventure and that are made really responsibly and behave really well and perform brilliantly. But what they do as a company is support, you know, their athletes, their ambassadors. And I mentioned earlier, like, you know, trying to leave the world a better place than you found it, or even just leave your corner in a better way than you found it. I think that's why I've continued to work with them as well, because that's something they do very well as well. You know, they empower everyone they come into contact with, whether it's, you know, their suppliers or the
I mean, that's for me, that was one of the most amazing things of I've kind of said, I think I might have said this to Dave when I had him on the podcast, but you know, I got to work with BAM because they when the beast from the east, if you're not in England, a few years ago, maybe 2018 19, we had a big storm come through. I think it was 18. But maybe not. Anyway, whenever it was. Big snowstorm, loads of snow. And I was really fed up with seeing on Instagram. I was purely yoga at the time. I was really fed up with basically all the only successful posts are always basically the really skinny, pretty women in tiny bikinis on a beach in Bali doing some outrageous pose. And I was just like, and I was really fed up with like, oh God, like, you know, I get like 30 likes to a picture and like, you know, I put literally all my time and effort into like writing this epically like useful post. And no one fucking reads it. And then basically, so I was like, right, fuck these guys. And like, I needed some new pants, and I was wearing Next boxer shorts at the time. So basically, I was going outside and I was doing silly yoga poses. I love how we're
back to the pants. It always comes
always back to the pants. Always back to the pants. For those who don't know, that we were discussing before we started about pants. But so I was doing like headstands and forearm stands, stuff in the snow, and I was tagging like, "Hey, Next, can I have some free pants, please?" And then like everyone was going, "Yeah, Next, give them some pants, give them some pants." But and then someone tagged BAM and said, if that was BAM, they would totally give you some pants. And then whoever was working for BAM at the time, I can't remember, but they kind of reached out and went, "Do you want some pants?"
I love it. That's such a better. I want a pants story for BAM. I think they gave me some bezos before Russia. I think that's how I first got involved with them.
I mean,
man, I want a pants story.
If you just go through my Instagram, don't go through my Instagram, but essentially it's just me doing everything in my BAM pants. Yeah, and then so once that happened,
love at first pants. That was it.
Love at first pants. It really was, and everyone who wears their pants just never goes back.
Absolutely,
never goes back. But it's their like environmental stance, and like, and they're, you know, again, Dave talked about it on the podcast, but like, it's like, I'm a small fish, but like I can actually give people in a factory, like I can make sure that people are actually paid fairly and are treated fairly. And, you know, they're growing as a company, but they're still a really small company compared to most brands. But the good they do and how much they have pushed, like, you know, cyclical like fashion, and how much they've pushed.
It's in everything they do as well, isn't it? You know, like even in the packaging they send out, like it's not like a gimmick, you know, a marketing gimmick. It's like, how can we make this the best it can be for environment, for people, and everything like that. So it's obviously really genuine.
It really is, like, and you can see, you know, and we work with obviously Danny, and you know, she's a legend. But like, even just how much they care about, like, you know, we're ambassadors, but like how much they care about us, like making sure that we've got what we need, like we can like support the company. It's like, I just love them.
We love BAM.
We love BAM. Right, so we're kind of wrapping up. I mean, I really want to talk to you about all your adventures in depth, but you know, maybe another time. But as always, the podcast is called Move, Breathe, Live. Like, I literally gave up nursing, even though I'm having to do some more of it at the moment, because I was fed up with people turning up to hospital with stuff they didn't need to be there for. The stuff that if they learned to move and breathe better, they could probably live a happier, healthier life. So you have moved and breathed potentially more than most people of your age. What have you learned? What could, maybe if you could give one piece of advice, and it doesn't even have to be moving or breathing, it might be just something that you've learned, which you talk about. But if someone listens to this and like, what piece of sage advice could you give them that they can take away and go, I can potentially live a slightly happier, healthier life?
I don't know how sage this is, and it might be a bit cliche, but I mean, I think underpinning all of it is this idea of competence versus confidence. And we think what we need is competence, and I'm not dismissing the skills needed for some things, but I would say confidence is more important. So the conclusion of that is to start now, and don't wait. You know, what we tend to see are all these experts in the field, or all these people in the gym that look really fit, and they've been going there for 6 years, so of course they're really fit. What we don't tend to see so much are the days, the weeks, the months, of years of hard work that has gone up to that. So I think my first nudge would be to just start where you are, but make sure you give it a go. Like, it took me years to build up to this career, even if we're talking about a financial endpoint. But that applies to moving, to breathing, to living. You know, the sooner you start, the sooner you'll start to diminish those knowledge gaps that you need, and you'll get more competent. So
Love it. And that's basically, just face it, it's how you've managed to build a career as an
Yes,
adventure
give it a
athlete.
go. Give it a go.
Just give it a go. And when again, I'm not going to use the word fail. When you DNF, you just, you know,
because
as long as
there's people to help, you know. I think that's the thing, like, you don't have to be an expert. If there's something you want to do, or if you're not even sure where to start, these days there's absolutely anyone who can help you figure that out. You know, I was lucky in some respects that I was a personal trainer, so I already kind of knew how my body worked and how to physically prepare myself.
Yeah.
But if that's not you, and you need to get a bit healthier anyway, then just find someone who, you know, there's resources there, I think, effectively.
Yeah. Amazing. And you know, if you do listen to this and you think, I want to go and do something crazy, then I'm sure that Laura will be more than happy to like cheerlead you and go reach out and ask me, and I'll say, yeah, I can do it. Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure. Your book,
thanks for that.
is it Kairos? Is that how you pronounce
Kairos.
it? Kairos. Why is it Kairos? Let's just go for
that. So there's two different, this kind of goes back to my little bit of nugget of advice there, but basically there's two different types of time, and ancient Greeks had two different types of time. So you have Chronos time, which is chronological, which is the time that we all think about and know about. And then I came across Kairos time, which is why I've adopted it. And Kairos is basically known as the right or opportune moment. It's when everything kind of lines up. So the reason I adopted it is because I think we often go through life thinking like, oh, I'll do this when, you know, like when all the ducks line up in a row and all the rest of it. And certainly I was a bit like, oh, I'll do this big adventure when. And then actually I've come to understand over the years that that time doesn't exist. You have to grab it. You know, nothing is ever going to look perfectly aligned to do something. And I adopted Kairos time because I was like, that's the moment. You know, that moment comes when you make the decision. It's the decision first.
Love it. I absolutely love it. It's such a cool, not only a cool name for a book, but such a cool like thought process too. So thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you? What, you know, if they want to get in touch, if they want to just find out what your next adventure is, what's the place?
Yeah, so I am on social media. I'm on Instagram as Laura Kairos. I'm on Facebook and Twitter as well. And then the website is laurakairos.com. So really easy.
Sweet. All of that will be in the notes. So if you want it, then go and find Laura and say hello. If you have any questions for her, I'm sure if you either stick them in any of the Instagram posts or on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, then between myself and Laura, if Laura doesn't see them, I'll forward them on, and we will make sure they get answered. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura. It's been a bloody pleasure as always, and let's hope that we can go hang out and sing some more Alanis Morissette sometime soon.
Yes. I'm ready for the meatloaf duet. That's what I'm waiting for.
I'm still waiting. Still waiting. When we do that, guys, you'll see what the in-joke is. But
bonus
in the meantime,
footage,
exactly. Well, thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we will catch up with you soon.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.